killed by that deadliest epidemic, Black Plague. Bubonic plague, a disease the English called the Black Death, came to England in the cold, wet summer of 1348. Plague was the most potent illness ever to hit humans. The plague was spread to humans by fleas carried by rats. When the fleas bit humans, the disease was injected into them. The period between 1337 and 1453 is marked by a long succession of skirmishes between France and England, which are collectively known as the 100 Years' War. Latin and French were the dominant languages in 14th century England. However, in the later half of the century, English came to its own, thanks to the sterling work done by Chaucer and some others like Landland, Gower, and Wycliffe, who wrote in English and wrote well. Chaucer's uniqueness and significance in English literature are particularly borne out in the very designation given to his age as the Age of Chaucer. Well does Compton Rickett observe, Chaucer's world is medieval, but beneath his medievalism the leaven of the Renaissance is already at work. 3 periods of Chaucer's life. French period. Chaucer's first period was of French influence. It includes his works Roman de la Rose and the Book of the Duchess. Italian period. In this period his works were modeled primarily on Dante and Boccaccio. Important works of this period are The House of Fame and Parliament of Owls. English period. It is the most successful and creative period in his life. During this period he wrote The Legend of Good Women and his masterpiece The Canterbury Tales. The Parliament of Fowls. The poem begins with the narrator reading Cicero's Somnium Scipionis in the hope of learning some certain thing. When he falls asleep, Scipio Africanus the elder appears and guides him up through the celestial spheres to a gate promising both a well of grace and a stream that leadeth to the Sorvel where/the as a fish in prison is al dry, reminiscent of the famous grimly inscribed gates in Dante's Inferno. After some deliberation at the gate, the narrator enters and passes through Venus's dark temple with its friezes of doomed lovers and out into the bright sunlight. Here nature is convening a parliament at which the birds will all choose their mates. The 3 tersel, male, eagles make their case for the hand of a formal, female, eagle until the birds of the lower estates begin to protest and launch into a comic parliamentary debate, which nature herself finally ends. None of the tersels wins the formal. For at her request nature allows her to put off her decision for another year. Indeed, female birds of prey often become sexually mature at 1 year of age, males only at 2 years. Nature, as the ruling figure, in allowing the formal the right to choose not to choose, is acknowledging the importance of free will, which is ultimately the foundation of a key theme in the poem, that of common profit. Nature allows the other birds, however, to pair off. The dream ends with a song welcoming the new spring. The dreamer awakes, still unsatisfied, and returns to his books, hoping still to learn the thing for which he seeks. The Legend of Good Women. The Legend of Good Women is a poem in the form of a dream vision by Geoffrey Chaucer. The poem is the 3rd longest of Chaucer's works, after the Canterbury Tales and Troilus and Cressid, and is possibly the first significant work in English to use the iambic pentameter or decasyllabic couplets, which he later used throughout the Canterbury Tales. This form of the heroic couplet would become a significant part of English literature, no doubt inspired by Chaucer. The prologue describes how Chaucer is reprimanded by the god of love and his queen, Alceste, for his works, such as Troilus and Cressid, depicting women in a poor light. Cressid is made to seem inconstant in love in that earlier work, and Alceste demands a poem of Chaucer extolling the virtues of women and their good deeds. The poet recounts 10 stories of virtuous women in 9 sections. The legends are Cleopatra, Thisbe, Dido, Hypsipyle, Medea, Lucrece, Ariadne, Philomela, Phyllis, and Hypermnestra. The work is a similar structure to the later Monk's Tale, and like that tale, and many of his other works, seems to be unfinished. Chaucer's sources for the legends include Virgil's Aeneid, Vincent of Vice, Guido del Collins' Historia Destruction Estroi, Gaius Julius Hyginus Fabula and of its metamorphoses and heroides. The incomplete nature of the poem is suggested by Chaucer's retraction from the Canterbury Tales, which calls the work the 25th. Ladies 15 and 19 are also numbers used to describe the work. In the prologue several women are mentioned: Esther, Penelope, Marcia Caetanese, wife of Cato the Younger, Lavinia, Polyxena and Laodamia, whose stories are not recorded, and the 19 ladies in waiting of Alceste mentioned in the prologue might suggest an unfulfilled structure. The command of Queen Alceste is said, by John Lydgate in The Fall of Princes, to be a poetic account of an actual request for a poem by Anne of Bohemia, who came to England in 1382 to marry Richard II. If true, this would make Chaucer an early poet laureate. Joan of Kent, Richard's mother, is also sometimes considered a model for Alceste. The supposed royal command is one suggested reason for the poem's unfinished state, as Chaucer got bored with the task and gave up. Several passages hint at Chaucer's dissatisfaction. The Book of the Duchess. The Book of the Duchess is a poem of the dream vision genre, presumably composed as an elegy for the death of Blanche, Duchess of Lancaster, the wife of Geoffrey Chaucer's patron, the Royal Duke of Lancaster, John of Gaunt, in 1368 or 1369. The poem was composed sometime in the few years after this event, and it is generally considered to be flattering to both the Duke and the Duchess. It is composed in octosyllabic rhyming couplets, and it runs 1,334 lines. The poet tells of his insomnia. Finally, upon reading of its metamorphoses, he falls asleep. He tells the story of his dream, which begins with him awakening in a chamber covered with pictures of the Trojan War. The dreamer hears the sound of a horn signaling the start of a hunt, and he joins it. While the deer, the quarry, is on the run, the dreamer becomes separated from the hunt and is led down a flowery path by a wayward young hunting dog. There he finds a handsome young knight dressed in black. The knight, in a deep sorrow, tells him that he lost his lady love and lost a game of chess with fortune. The dreamer tries to console him, but the knight tells him he has lost more than he knows. The story of the Black Knight and Lady White follows, in which the perfection of the lady is described. Lady White became the knight's wife, and they lived in harmony for years before she died. The knight blames fortune, whose fickle wheel spins until she takes away the happiness she gives. The dreamer at last perceives the true sorrow of the knight. The hunt ends with the party returning to a long castle. The dreamer awakens for real and resolves that his dream has been so curious and remarkable that it must be put into a poem. The House of Fame, a longer poem written about 10 years after the Book of the Duchess, runs 2,158 lines and was left unfinished. The 3 extant books begin with the retelling of the Aeneid by the Roman poet Virgil, as found written on a brass tablet in a temple of glass in the vision of a dreamer. An eagle takes up the dreamer to a point between heaven and earth, which is the House of Fame. There the dreamer, who has written many love poems but has not had much success in love in his own life, may hear of the love stories going on all around the world. Once in the House of Fame, the dreamer sees the great bards of ancient times. The goddess Fame, of many eyes and tongues, holds court and hears supplicants' pleas. She sometimes grants them and sometimes does not, as she pleases, with no thought to logic or good judgment. Chaucer satirizes fame and the desire for fame as vanity, using the allegorical figure of fame as a horrible vision of the lies and false reputation that earthly notoriety perpetuates. The dreamer leaves the house. He comes upon a large house made of wicket wigs. In it every kind of speech and report are mingling together, in a sort of clearing-house of gossip. Truth and lies mingled together, going out the windows and down to earth. The poem ends abruptly, just as a man of authority appears. The Parliament of Fowls is a much shorter work at 699 lines in rhyme royal. Chaucer is credited with introducing this form into English. This poem begins with a discussion of the dream of Scipio, the 7th book of De Res Publica by Cicero. In it, Scipio the Younger is taken on a tour of heaven and hell by his grandfather Scipio Africanus, where he is lectured on the virtue of leading a good life. After reading this book, the poet falls asleep and dreams that Scipio Africanus takes him on a tour of his own. Africanus and the dreamer enter a garden in which all the allegorical personages pertaining to romantic love reside. They witness the gathering of birds, for it is Saint Valentine's Day, the day they choose their mates for the year before Dame Nature. There is a dispute over the favor of a female eagle, with 3 tussles, male eagles, in competition for her. Though there is much discussion, the decision is eventually deferred until the next year by the formal herself, for she is unable to choose. The dreamer awakens and resolves to read more books in order to gain more wisdom. The Canterbury Tales. The wife of Bath is the next to tell a story, and she begins by claiming that happy marriages occur only when a wife has sovereignty over her husband. When the wife of Bath finishes her story, the friar offers his own tale about a summoner. The host, however, always the peacekeeper, admonishes the friar to let the summoner alone. The summoner interrupts and says the friar can do as he likes and will be repaid with a tale about a friar. Nevertheless, the friar's tale about a summoner makes the summoner so angry that he tells an obscene story about the fate of all friars and then continues with an obscene tale about one friar in particular. After the friar and summoner finish their insulting stories about each other, the host turns to the clerk and asks for a lively tale. The clerk tells a story about Griselda and her patients, a story that depicts the exact opposite of the wife of Bath's tale. The merchant comments that he has no wife as patient and sweet as Griselda and tells of tale of a young wife who cheats on her old husband. After the merchant's tale, the host requests another tale about love and turns to the squire, who begins a tale of supernatural events. He does not finish, however, because the franklin interrupts him to compliment the squire on his eloquence and gentility. The host, interested only in getting the next story told, commands the franklin to begin his tale, which he does. The franklin tells of a happy marriage. Then the physician offers his tale of the tragic woe of a father and daughter, a story that upsets the host so much that he requests a merry tale from the pardoner. The pardoner tells a tale in which he proves that, even though he is not a moral man, he can tell a moral tale. At the end of the tale, the pardoner invites the pilgrims to buy relics and pardons from him and suggests that the host should begin because he is the most sinful. This comment infuriates the host. The night intercedes between the host and the pardoner and restores peace. The pilgrims then hear a story by the prioress about a young martyr. After the seriousness of this tale, the host turns to Chaucer and asks him for something to liven up the group. Chaucer begins a story about Certipus but is soon interrupted by the host, who exclaims that he is tired of the jingling rhymes and wants Chaucer to tell a little something in prose. Chaucer complies with the boring story of Mullaby. After the tale of Mullaby, the host turns to the merry monk and demands a story that he confidently expects to be a jovial and happy tale. Instead, the monk relates a series of tales in which tragedy befalls everyone. The knight joins in with the host in proclaiming that the monk's tales are too much to bear and requests a merry tale. But the monk refuses, and the host turns to the nun's priest and calls for a tale. Thus the nun's priest relates the tale of the barnyard rooster, Chanticleer, his lady, and a fox. The second nun then offers a tale that befits her station, a retelling of the events in the life of Saint Cecilia. Suddenly, 2 men approach the pilgrims. One is a canon, the other his yeoman, servant. The host welcomes them and asks whether either has a tale to tell. The canon's yeoman answers that his master has many strange tales filled with mirth and laughter, yet when he begins to tell of their life and actions, the canon slips away embarrassed and frightened. As the party nears Canterbury, the host demands a story from the manciple, who tells of a white crow that can sing and talk. Finally, the host turns to the last of the group, the parson, and bids him